colleagues. Thanks for coming back. I think that there are about 30 online participants. We would like to proceed with the second part of our event, and I would like to give the floor to Saulet for him to finish his presentation. He wants to talk about the administrative aspects because he mostly focused on the content, on the objectives and project components, and Saulet will tell us about the implementation mechanism and risks. Please, the floor goes back to you, Saulet. Thank you. Indeed, I have just a few administrative aspects. As for the content, I'll focus on the content a little bit when I'll talk about the working plan of the project. So let's focus on this slide first. As I said, according to the UNDP rules and according to the rules of logic, it is suggested that we create the project management unit. It would be a unit that monitors the project implementation, that adopts reports, makes adjustments to plans if necessary. And I mentioned this a little bit when it comes to the organizational chart. There is the Committee for Project Management that the group is accountable to. We have the project manager, the climate policy specialist, climate science analyst. I'm sorry, I'm not a specialist on climate policy. As for the climate science analyst, that's me. And we have the communication specialist. It's Medina. She was sitting right there. She's out of the room right now. And we have the project assistant. I don't know why I didn't mention her. It's Aygul. She helps us a lot with budget, with financing, with organizational aspects. And oversight and quality of the project, the appropriate monitoring and the legal framework is ensured by the United Nations Development Program, the country office of the UN, and Istanbul Regional Hub. Lily provided the presentation earlier. She's actually she works in, she represents the Istanbul Hub of the UN and the UN headquarters in New York. So the UN actually does the oversight of the project to make sure that it is implemented correctly and in line with the rules of monitoring and assessment. It makes sure that the procurement is carried out properly on a transparent basis. There is a number of different guidelines that show how things must be done. Our main beneficiary is the line ministry, the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources. It acts as the national body. As for the Green Climate Fund that provides financing for this project, well, it has its own language, and the Ministry of Ecology is called the DNA in their language. In Russian, it sounds like the designated authorized or national agency or organization. So that's the Ministry of Ecology, that is the GCF-DNA. And if you want to implement something through the Green Climate Fund, you need to work with the ministry and approve the project. And that's what I was talking about prior to the coffee break. If we create the concept note, it probably will go through the Green Climate Fund. And the majority of the environmental or ecological international organizations mostly work through the Ministry of Ecology. The project support is provided by the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources and its institutes, such as the Information Analytical Center, Rasil Damu, the Department for Climate Policy, CAS Hydromet, which is one of our expert hubs, regional center of the Istanbul Regional Hub, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of National Economy, Ministry of Finance, the Committee for Water Resources, Ministry of Emergency, the Committee for Construction and Utilities, and the representatives of the private sector. So this is the short information about which representatives are included into the project management committee. In the United Nations Development Program, we have the rules for the project implementation, and we always need to consider risks. So there are 4 major risks. One of them is a political risk. There is the operational risk. There are financial risks and social and environmental risks.
So if we translate into the normal language, probably the Ministry of Ecology or the government of Kazakhstan would tell everything, climate change is not a priority anymore, we are not very much interested. Then the project implementation would be jeopardized. And in order to avoid this from happening, we need to engage middle managers to keep relevance, full information about the systems, proactive approach to cooperate with the stakeholders. So this is how we largely communicated with the Department for Climate Policy, so they would share the message that this is a very important and still relevant task. Why the risk level is low, most likely it will never occur, because the climate change is a very important political issue, and implication or impact would be very high. And if something happens, it would be affecting the project severely. But we consider these risks as low. There is a risk of insufficient institutional capacity, including the relevant holders, like national partners. And whenever you talk about the climate change, everyone remembers about the GHG emission reduction, whereas adaptation is slightly different perspective. My apologies. The likelihood of this risk is moderate. Impact could be, likelihood is low, impact is medium. And the issue is that not every people know what adaptation is, and this may lead to low pace of implementation with some poor quality. This is why we're going to deliver training materials, TOT, in order to ensure succession in the process. And this would include information campaign that we're going to organize to engage as many people and raise interest as possible. Then there is a risk that after the project completion, the government would not have means to support national mechanisms. So likelihood is low. Impact is medium, and the risk level is moderate. Money is always lacking, right? And we come from a ground that government is implementing measures which are adaptation to climate change, but they are not called adaptation. Our job is to explain which processes are adaptation and help in properly naming them, and then national authorities can see that adaptation projects are implemented, and they should be implemented, and they bring a lot of benefit. And also, we would like, within the project, to launch a process that adaptation to climate change would be self-sufficient. I mean, it will be income-generating flow, and it will meet the demand for money. And we have the National Chamber at Amiken, and as part of the finance from Japan, we had a joint project where farmers were very passionate about being part of the project. And one of the projects that we launched, so we selected a farm where we offered the drip irrigation system. It was G2C province, and the farmer, after making estimates, after understanding how it is going to implement and what would be the benefit, allocated additional money. we just said that this many hectares we can cover. And after all this estimates understanding, he said that we will allocate, I will allocate more money, and it was like a pilot field. So he invested his own money, right? More than what we invested from our side. This is how we generate adaptation solutions. So we raise funds, and the farmers allocated funds. So instead of two harvest campaigns, the farmer has 3 harvest campaigns during one season. And this is because he invested his own money. And the last risk that the affected individuals, especially marginalized population, especially those disadvantaged, will not be able to make their voices heard. Well, of course, we cannot engage absolutely everyone, but it is important that this voice is shared by the NGOs and those CSOs which cover marginalized population, like International Organization for Migration. They have officers who frontline officers who work with the migrants, less protected population, not only in Kazakhstan but globally. And it would be necessary to include their concerns. That's why we think that the probability is unlikely. Impact could be average, and risk level is low, because there are mechanisms how to address some of the issues, maybe through the polls or social surveys, having special services provided for such vulnerable and affected individuals. And I'm sure that UNDP can offer some solutions. Well, with that, I'm done. Then in the next part I'm going to present would be the work plan for 2024, but I will develop on it a bit later. Thank you so much, Saulet. I would propose to have the Q&A question and answer session now, because we will have other experts to talk about the monitoring, gender aspects. So the floor is open to talk about the substantive part of the presentation. So, dear colleagues, please, we know we have online participants. You can unmute yourself as well. Minister of Ecology. Right. Yeah, thank you so much, Saulet, for a very informative presentation. I have a comment. Look, like as part of this project, we have the climate risk assessment and climate vulnerability assessment for 4 priority sectors, which are identified in the national law for 2 pilot provinces. But for the adaptation planning and implementation as part of the consistent policy, it would be relevant to have a national adaptation plan that would be valid or would be applicable for the whole country. I have a request, if it is possible, in the course of the project implementation, to consider this nationwide national adaptation plan. I believe that we have this opportunity. Well, of course, we will move along the project, but the way I see it, we can have the national vulnerability assessment for the country and then have a detailed vulnerability assessment for these 4 pilot provinces. I think that it's possible. It will not require any additional resources, in my thinking. But we have to discuss it during the steering committee meeting. May I add, dear colleagues? Well, as I said, the task, the objective of this Inception workshop to discuss the relevance, adequacy of the project components and the content, and we need to be focusing on the big picture that is stressed in the project document. And Saulet did a great job to explain this. And as part of this meeting, we can offer some kind of deviation, some I would say kind of outliers from this overall project document, and this would be documented in the minutes, in the protocol of this Inception workshop. And then we will present it to donors. And if donors would find this very relevant, requiring revision of the project document, we will go for it. If this would be considered as minor, we will just incorporate this and we'll move along. And thank you so much, dear madam, for your proposal. And then eventually we'll decide, will it be a sectoral adaptation plan or regional or provincial level or country level, and this level would be decided through our discussions with relevant government stakeholders. Colleagues from the Institute of Economic Research, so you are working with some adaptation plans on a regional scale or sector level scale. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I have a question about the planning horizon. I understand that the project will end in 2028. Do you plan any succession or update, any long-term activities? And the question about ARI, which is working on the national adaptation strategy, how would you see this embedded into the national adaptation planning process? Right. As I said, one of the components has mainstreaming, or we're being part of developing some national strategies. So we're guided by the planning horizon of that document. It's difficult to answer now. If it's like a low-carbon pathway, 2060, then the planning horizon would be the same, 2060. It will depend on what document we're talking about. And what was the second question? I think that this answers all the questions that you asked. Thank you. I think that these are technical details that would likely to be discussed by you as part of the working group, because on this Inception workshop, I don't think that we can decide that this would be the planning horizon that we decide together. It will be a decision through consultation process, and this is where you're going to share your vision. I think that you are more equipped with data on adaptation than us, because you have been working for the last 2 years. Okay, any more questions, Dana? IOM. Thank you so much, Sel, dear colleagues. My name is Dana Oras. I represent the National Organization for Migration. It is UN agency for migration issues. And I would like to, first of all, thank the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources and UNDP for invitation, because as it was repeatedly stressed by Saulet, that apart from 4 key areas that have been identified for project implementation, there is cross-sectoral or cross-cutting issues such as medicine or healthcare and mobility of population, what we call like climate migration. Afternoon, we will have an interactive session, and with your permission, dear colleagues, I'd like to make a presentation for 7 minutes on the vision, experience of IOM, how we can integrate accounting of population mobility, including the migrants' rights, including climate migrants' rights into this process. Thank you so much for your request. I think that we will reflect this into the Inception report, like how climate change affects the migration and other dependencies. Please, over to you. Thank you. I represent the National grain testing station named after Barayev, and I have a proposal. I have been following on the National Adaptation Plan for the last 5 years. I see some progress, I see some consistency with the ministries and so on, some alignment. But we haven't reached the final point yet. It's good that we kind of relaunch this project, and I'm sure it will be properly implemented through different interventions. So my proposal is, so you mobilized experts or specialists from different industries, but these specialists, every specialist has their own approaches, their own judgments or opinions. It's not possible to incorporate everything. And you have been working with the ministries. Ministry, as a matter of fact, does not possess specialists. There are managers, right? And they formulate policy inadequately versus the specialists, right? So I would propose to go bottom up. For instance, we have the Ministry of Agriculture, and they have research institutes for agriculture, more than 40, of which 30 within the plant production. In every research institute, they have like laboratories, which do like seed breeding or special crops varieties. Somebody is responsible for soils or farming techniques and so on. And as a matter of fact, they do some job on the ground, some technology or measures to get adapted to climate change. The climate change is ongoing, right? And in all the research institutes, they are looking for some technology that would meet the modern, changed conditions of climate and soil. And the work is underway, the work is ongoing, and usually this work is financed by own resources or grant money, but they do not relate it to climate change, right? They do their job like in terms of breeding some crop or inventing another variety. So my proposal would be, starting from the national food security, finding a relevant specialist, like let's say within the Ministry of Economy, could be a department for the agribusiness development, where they have specialists. Then we can identify in which research institutes they have operations on a particular crop. And this work should be based on all the climate and soil division of the country, like from north to south. Let's say there are 10 national labs, and then we can assign them some task. We meet regularly, we talk formally, but on the grounds, people do their job. And I think that we need to invest into the local knowledge more. Maybe we need to have another finance line, budget item. Maybe take into account what people do on the grounds, just to carve out, to identify things related to climate change and then link it to adaptation. This would be small money, right? And this would be motivate these people. After the vegetation period ends, they can process the data, and then they take the findings and make a decision, right? And then share this decision or finding with you. In this lab, this research institute, after developing in technology, they can, on a research institute level, collecting the findings from all the labs, produce the adaptation work plan. And this would be part of the national adaptation plan. And they are the specialists, not the functionaries in the ministries know better, because they are the ones who know the details of the crop or a variety or a soil structure. Let's say we have a national center of excellence. So they collect information from all the labs, from all the field level units information, and then they transfer it to the ministries. Then it should be like bottom-up approach rather than top-down, because sitting on the top, you don't know what's going on the grounds, and they produce wrong or inadequate policies, or they do not have a clear picture. So I think that we should go bottom-up first. Next, in this research institutes, like I said, that I represent the research institutes named after Barayev, and my institution is becoming known in North Kazakhstan and beyond. So it's becoming a very well-known research institute. And working in my area, I see inadequate development of information technology. We have like GIS or some other, but some of the laboratories still lack this ICT. No need to buy or procure a very expensive thing, just to deliver training. Lab technicians on the grounds, especially those that would be mobilized, how to use the GIS technology. There are many available software that can be used for these training purposes. The key is to train how to process data. Now I have another proposal about information.
I would like to focus on Kazakhstan. I fully agree with your proposal to create the climate portal. And this climate portal is being discussed for a long time, since 2008, ever since I joined Kazakhstan. But it wasn't called a portal then. It was called the single information system or something like that, but it is not there yet. This is a very complicated matter, and the ministry with the accountable agencies are supposed to work together to make this happen. Kazakhstan, for example, due to this issue, created its own meteorological and hydrological database. Nevertheless, there are certain nuances. For example, we have here the Kazakhstan representative, and I have a remark that I would like to address to them. This meteorological database seems like it's there and everyone is using it, but there are classical stations, and the database provides information about only half of the stations. So let's say if there are 30 stations in total, there is information about 20 of them in the database, and information about 10 of them is missing. So, okay, we have information about 20 stations, we have daily data, we have data about for each 10 days, but the data is lagging behind for at least 3 months. And as the farmer, I do not need this data after I collected my yield. I need real-time data. And yes, of course, we realize that you have to process data, and it may take some time. And if we arrange things properly, it will take a day or so to process data and to put data into the database. So as for the technical aspects, yes, there are lots of data, but let me speak of the nuances. The data is provided in Greenwich, which means that we need to deduct 5 hours each time. It is better to show everything in the real time, in the local time. And again, it is not really convenient to download data. If you have 30 pages, you have to download each page again and again, and it's not very convenient. I'm talking about the daily data. So this mechanism needs to be improved, and this mechanism needs to be thought through. I don't know about the hydrological database. I don't work with hydrological data. Okay, I get it. We're digging into the technical details now, but the portal which we're trying to create, it is gonna be created, and we will try to take into account all of these nuances because, yes, indeed, we have really good data. There are some gaps, there are some drawbacks, but we will try to integrate everything in order to make it more automated and in order to make sure that these data are actively used. But gas hydromet 10 years ago is completely different from the current gas hydromet, especially in terms of information sharing or provision of information. There is a question in our chat with regards to my presentation, particularly paragraph 3.2.2, where I talk about inviting experts and stakeholders to choosing the most vulnerable region. Well, we'll actually hold the vulnerability analysis, and as a result of that analysis, we will choose 4 regions, and we will choose 2 regions out of 4 for a pilot project. This will be done as a result of the vulnerability assessment. This is how we're going to choose our regions, and of course, these regions will be suggested for approval at the meeting of the Committee for Project Management that consists of the representatives of different ministries, agencies, NGOs, etc. They will participate in this work, and they will be aware of the results of the selected region. This is in response to Madam Joy, who sent her question in the chat box. I have a question about the regions. We haven't selected the regions yet. There is one more question from Azamat Kawazov. Azamat? Hello, dear colleagues. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, I have a short comment. Just wanted to emphasize high relevance and timeliness of this project because, indeed, we started to deal with those implications that the climate change has. I'm talking about floods. I'm talking about different emergencies which we've been observing lately. And that is why when we want to scale up adaptation, we realize that the adaptation measures are actually highly relevant and very necessary. So in response to the question about the portal of climate data, on your slide, I saw that in addition to climate data, there was information about the use of data, the use of adaptation data. I suggest that maybe we expand this portal. It makes sense to expand this portal because in the regional center, there is the Central Asian Climate Information Portal. It's the regional one. But since the project speaks of adaptation, maybe we shall not confine ourselves to climate data only and include or call it the adaptation portal and include all results of projects, materials, analytical information, just to make it a portal of knowledge rather than a portal of data. A portal of knowledge about adaptation measures that can bring together different stakeholders, that can provide information of all kinds. It would be an expanded version of the portal with a broader capacity. Is it possible? Azamat, thank you. I see what you're talking about. I believe that this is what actually is going to happen because first we will hold the vulnerability assessment, then we will create a portal, then we will input the results of the vulnerability assessment into the portal. We will choose the most appropriate technological solutions, taking into account the suggestions of Saken Savetovich. When, for example, we will hold the assessment of the work, with research centers and institutes, we will think of the potential solutions to the vulnerabilities detected. I would also like to connect the GIS system to the portal, but it's not all going to happen in one night. We know that we want this portal to constantly develop and grow, and it is really hard to speak of the year of 2028, but when this project is over, we really want this portal to stay alive and to be actively used. Just like the portal that brings together all information about the vulnerabilities, analytical information, and so on and so forth. We do not really know how the interface is going to look like, but we see in general how everything is going to work. Thank you. I wanted to add a few words. My name is Ayjan. I'm from the Ministry of Ecology, Department for Climate Policy. I have a comment to remarks of Sakyan Savetovich. Indeed, just like you said, we laid the foundation and the legislation on climate change adaptation as the state body, and we've defined 4 major sectors, but right now we're dealing with the problem of not being able to launch this process on the regional level because of the lack of understanding. There are different activities being undertaken by different ministries and locally, but they are not called climate change adaptation activities. It's what is important is that we launch these projects, we have the strategic documents for the climate change adaptation. If in terms of this project, as suggested by Gulmira Kaliyeva, if we can launch 4 pilot projects and expand the project, then this would be possible. This would make it possible to communicate or to translate this success to other regions. And in addition to agriculture, forestry, emergency, and water resources, we'll be able to cover other sectors, maybe going into healthcare, infrastructure, climate, and everywhere. We have to launch this process. This is our primary objective for the time being. As for the research institutes or centers, there is the Committee for Project Management established by the ministerial decree, which means that we can expand the list of individuals that would be involved in decision-making as part of this project, and I think that today we can discuss these things. It'd be good if we've involved the organizations and research centers that are present here today. They could contribute by giving their recommendations for the development of this project. Thank you. This is a very good remark. We'll take it into account. If there are no further comments or questions, which regions will be selected? I do not really know, but it seems like it's going to be western, eastern, southern, and northern parts of Kazakhstan. I'm talking about oblasts. I'm sorry. When I say region, I actually mean oblasts. The project actually says subnational, which means oblasts. We do not really mean regions in the traditional sense. We mean oblasts as administrative and geographical units. Yes, it's going to be scattered, but this work, as asked by the ministry, this refers to other oblasts as well. It'd be good if there was at least some data. I am not aware of how this is going to be organized, but we will try to work on the methodology first and think about how these things will be done, and we will do it in consultations with research centers and Kazakhstan, as well as other organizations and even maybe ministries, to properly select the major oblasts. Yes, please. My name is Nurlan Abayev. I'm from Kazakhstan. I just have a brief comment or remark to the remarks of Sakyan Savetovich. Our portal is called State Climate Cadastre, and it has information that was fully verified and went through the quality assurance processes. Compared to we have 118 automatic stations, and sometimes there are some interruptions in monitoring. That's actually a common thing globally. There are usually some emergencies, contingencies, electricity outage, or other unexpected situations. And therefore, we need to thoroughly verify data. At the same time, we are now working on including this data into the cadastre, and we're thinking about indicating the local time. We'll took note of this remark. For example, in short, on this station, the situation is different. In order to make our portal more user-friendly, of course, we'll take note of everything that you said, but we have API, and in order to, if other bodies need our data or other portals need our data, we're ready to share this data through the API platform. Not only we can share this data in the tabular form and the electronic format, it is possible to ensure the free data sharing, and relevant data usually are uploaded into the Tabirat Geo portal, and we also input our data into the open portal of the government. We try to provide all necessary data, and whatever you say, Saken Savetovich, I mean your remarks, they are highly relevant, and we will take note of them. As for the dates, yes, people come to us, they indicate their date, and we share the respective information that was present on a certain date. If we need to assess climate, or if you want to use this data as part of other research, the data shall go through the verification procedure. That takes about 2 months. And only then the data is inputted into the portal. That's the quality assurance requirement. Well, let's not dig into the technical details today. If our project can help you with automation or something else, we can include it into our objectives in order to make sure that we provide the respective support. No more questions or comments, please. My name is Nurulhan Beymurzaev. I'm from the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. Here is the question that I have. In the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, that is a newly established ministry, we have very important strategic documents that are being developed, such as the Water Code. And this Water Code was developed in order to find some response measures to the climate change adaptation processes. And that is why we have sections about adaptation. We have the legislative norm, and in terms of the national adaptation, national plans, such projects, well, in order to avoid the duplication of legislative norms, we first of all analyze the current legislation, including the Water Code and the concept for the development of water resources, as well as the concept for water saving. The roadmap of adaptation, as well as other documents, have to be looked through very carefully. Have you considered them? And again, speaking of climate change adaptation, there are many different projects, and I'm curious if you've analyzed these projects. Did you do the stock taking of such projects? I believe that this is really important. Indeed, we are working with your ministry and other ministries on this point, and as I noted earlier, we are going to hold the gap analysis. This gap analysis will not only focus on gaps, it will focus on what is being done right now. We will use existing analysis, and we'll carry out our own analysis and maybe make some amendments or changes by including all of the objectives that are being implemented right now, or that concern the project and that are being implemented by different ministries and agencies. Unfortunately, I don't know what PCF means. Target financing for projects. Yes, of course, we will analyze the target financing for projects in order to avoid duplication. And even if there is some duplication, well, I believe that it will concern the lessons learned so that we could analyze our mistakes and come up with something better. Thank you very much, Nurlihan. Well, as for the climate change provisions in the water code, yes, we'd love to include them into the plan. And of course, we are there to help. During the coffee break, I heard that you are trying to, I think it was either you or Toligan who said that you are trying to create the Association of Water Users or water consumers. We can facilitate you with this matter by providing expert assistance as well. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? If not, I would like to thank you all and give the floor to Duzbol. Let's. Just like I said during my presentation, when I provided information about the project infrastructure, I said that working in the UN is not that easy because there are lots of rules and regulations that need to be followed or complied with. And Duzbol will tell us about the issues or past matters that we're going to deal with, and he'll tell us about how everything is going to be monitored and verified. Yes, you can stand by the podium. Could you please show Duzbol's presentation on the screen? Good day, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for introducing me. My name is Duzbol Tursunmuratov. I'm the monitoring and reporting specialist in the UNDP, and I will try to briefly tell you about how the monitoring and assessment of our projects in the UNDP looks like. We'll talk about those who are involved in the process, and probably it would be impossible to tell you about everything in 10 minutes. That is why I'll try to be very brief and simple and talk and be to the point and talk about the philosophy of such an approach. Saulet repeatedly. Well, first of all, Saulet, thank you very much for explaining the essence of the project. And thank you for telling us about the project parameters and goals.
What is the tentative budget, what interventions, what objectives, what are the key partners. And now, when I'm going to brief you on the UNDP-funded project monitoring, you will have a clearer picture based on the information that Saulet was kindly presenting to you. And he repeatedly mentioned how difficult it is to be guided by the UNDP policies and procedures, including the monitoring. And I wouldn't be criticizing, but I would use simple language to explain how we do it in UNDP. UNDP, it is a large international organization within the UN family, so our key mission is to implement projects. I think that more than 170 countries where we have our offices, to which Kazakhstan is no exception, and all our projects are aiming to facilitate the implementation of SDGs under the Agenda 2030. The project that we're kickstarting today falls into this picture. The SDG 13, climate change, would be covered under this project, and the project monitoring and assessment is a key operation. And how well we monitor the performance of the project would impact the performance of UNDP. The monitoring is needed to be sure that the projects are implemented effectively Second is that the objectives under each project are achieved. Third, in order to ensure transparency of our institution and meet the reporting requirements by different stakeholders, donors, individuals and legal entities, governments to which UNDP is working for. Talking about the overall monitoring framework, it consists of few key building blocks. First, it's mechanisms of control and management on a UN level. My colleagues from previous sessions explained this. For instance, in the beginning of this event, we had the regional officer from Istanbul office, Madam Lili Ilieva. The event was launched by our colleague Asel, who is the director of the Energy and Environment Department in UNDP. Saulet represent the project team side. I mean, these are the levels of officers, different levels of officers which are involved in the monitoring of our projects. And we are not limited by the local country office. We talk of the regional bureau, headquarters. At every monitoring stage, the respective officers would be involved, and this is how we ensure multi-layered controls to make sure that our projects are implemented in the most efficient way. Next is the hacked concept. In Russian, that would mean harmonized approach to cash flows. It is important to understand who we work with on a financial level, and in order to start any financial relationship with any partner, we have a due diligence, how efficient the donors are, how effective they are. So we are kind of screening the partners, and then we see what is the financing structure of the potential partner. And if the screening is okay, then we sign an agreement, and then we have settlement. And screening is not limited to the initial stage, like before signing any financial document. In the course of project implementation, in the course of the signed agreements, we review, we revisit through audits or spot checking. Is it really that the organization is effectively using money that were disbursed under this project? And this makes it possible to see clearly as to whether the money is spent transparently and targeting the achievement of goals. Next is the social and ecological standards. Saulet, in his presentation, presented the register of risks on a design stage, and the experts which produce the project documents identify these risks. And in the UNDP, we are having the integrated risk management approach. The job is to analyze on time every aspect of the project and try to forecast any potential events in the future that would influence the project implementation. And the impact could be both negative and positive. And having the forecast of potential events, which we interpret as risks. Having analyzed these risks and having planned the events to reduce the negative implications or leveraging the positive implications, this is how we try to improve the quality of decision that we make in the course of project implementation. And according to the internal category, we have like 8 risk categories. You have seen operational, financial, political, but there are 2 categories which we put separately. We pay special focus on these two categories, ecological and social risks, because these are the risks that may have a severe implications for the beneficiaries, for the partners, and severely affect the project outcomes. This is why social and ecological standards to which UNDP adheres are very important for us. And in order to proceed with any project, we have a due screening of each project for potential risks or violation of social and ecological standards. And the similar screening that our project has passed. So we have a risk of impact to affected individuals, which may be disregarded in the decision-making process. And in order to approve any project document, we produce the risk map in the first place, and we develop the action plan to mitigate the risks. And every decision that the project makes should take into account this risk register, or this risk list, and it is an ongoing process. The risks that we have identified are not the final risks. It's not like the close-end question. In the course of the project implementation, the project team, together with the partners, will be regularly monitoring the project implementation status, conditions in which the project is implemented, some intermediate results, in order to understand, are there any new emerging risks, are there any threats, or there are some potentially positive implications that would be reflected in the project implementation. And this would be until the project ends. And this is a collective endeavor in which every UNDP officer would be involved, and all the attendees here. The platform for discussion of such risks or interventions would be the events like today, which is the monitoring event being formal, and it is part of the monitoring part of the project. And I believe that you witnessed the efficiency of this approach, and we will further discuss the project, the objectives, approaches, and so on. And this is how we receive the feedback from all the stakeholders, and this is how we can make adjustments to the project plan, to the project objectives, and other components. Another big pillar related to the monitoring system in a wider sense is approach to budgeting. And we are performance-oriented budgeting, or it's like results-based management. It's slightly different from traditional, conventional, when the budgeting is on an item or line basis. In our case, we allocate funds taking into account findings, outcomes. So we allocate a specific amount for outcome, and then we monitor the project implementation through the outcomes. And the monitoring per se is the key aspect of the general monitoring approach, and it is the most important from the performance perspective. Speaking practically, we can divide monitoring of results into few components. First is planning of the results. While producing the product document, while designing the project, you already understand what outcomes the project has to achieve till the end, disbursing money that the donor has allocated for this purpose. The project document, if you haven't time to read it, and it is a fundamental document which describes every project parameter, and there is a special section. It's a outcomes framework or results framework, where all these outcomes are described with quantitative and qualitative indicators, on which basis we can be confident in saying that a particular objective has been achieved. And this is an approach for objective statement. Yes, we achieved this and this result, or no, we failed to achieve this and this result, or we partially achieved this and this result. And the same approach allows to have a very objective picture, like where we are, what percent we reached the objective. After we identify the objectives, we have tentative indicators to be achieved, and then we proceed with the project implementation. We start spending money, we start implementing some interventions, hiring experts, and so on. And in parallel, we collect data that allow us to be very objective from where we are, how far away we are from reaching our outcomes. And this is what we call the kind of monitoring. After having regularly data, we understand how successful we are. Do we meet our plans? What adjustments should be made in order to return back to the planned trajectory? Maybe it is worth revisiting the project objectives or redistribute the funds. Through data collection and analysis, we receive the feedback that the project leadership, partnerships, partners of the project may use to analyze and make their decisions in terms of project implementation. Also, the data that we receive help us assess the project. Assessment is the project that we undertake against a particular project where we engage third parties, like independent experts at some point of the project or in the very end. And these experts provide us the objective reporting on how effectively we use the money. Did we do the cooperation with the partners correctly? Did we do the good monitoring of the project process? How sustainable the results would be that the project has achieved? Unfortunately, this particular project does not assume this assessment. Maybe at some point, in coordination with the donors, this component would be added, but it doesn't mean that the project will not be analyzed, because apart from the project assessment, the team will assess the country-level program, thematic assessment, and this would cover many aspects, including of this project. The monitoring system that I'm talking about, apart from all other things, helps to report in a very high-quality manner, especially in front of our partners, donors. In this case, we talk about the GCF, other relevant stakeholders like the ministries, which we have here, NGOs within the UNDPs. So there is a reporting system with frequency requirements, and having the efficient monitoring system helps us to prepare high-quality, timely reports, which, among other things, which, apart from analyzing the progress, contains information like what lessons we learned in the project implementation, what recommendations we can offer to the project steering committee and partners to improve the project implementation. Some other implication that would benefit UNDP and cooperation with the partners. So apart from the results that monitoring covers, the monitoring processes would cover other aspects of the project, like the theory of change. So let's generously explain what the theory of change means. I have seen this slide before with a lot of text, but speaking simple English, the theory of change is a logic of sequence of consistent steps that would lead to the targeted result. For instance, we have 10 specific results, and this theory of change explains how we're going to achieve these results. So we do this, this, and this. We will use this and these resources, and then, subject to, like nothing happens, we achieve this and this result. So this theory of change is regularly analyzed, and if necessary, this theory of change can be amended, and this would affect the key parameters of the project. We have quality standards in project implementation. These are in-house UNDP standards, and we regularly analyze every project that we implement as to whether this project meets the quality standards. It is an in-house procedure through which we can be sure that the project is implemented effectively, it is transparent, it is beneficial, and we will be ready to implement this project further on. And if at some point this analysis demonstrates that the project systemically deviates from the pathway or fails to meet the standards, then there will be a big question mark on the project implementation, and this would spur some results, some discussion with the partners.
Risks. Well, I already mentioned that risks are permanent, their identification and their analysis are also permanent. Some risks emerge, some disappear, and here it is really important for the UNDP to cooperate with other partners, because this implies collective discussions of the context of the project implementation, discussions of what may happen in the project and what is happening in the project, which may make our life harder or which may help us get additional benefits. And operating indicators, this is budget spending, and so on and so forth. On this slide, I decided to list major monitoring tools which we use in our work. First, field trips or field visits. That's how we call them within the UNDP. This is what allows us to collect data locally. For example, if we implement some pilot initiatives in a certain location, I'm sorry to interrupt you, we are beyond our schedule. I'm about to wrap up. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the reminder. So, I am not going to provide details about these tools. They are self-explanatory, and they're part of the monitoring plan that is included into the project document. This is my final slide, which confirms my words once again. So, colleagues in the UNDP and beyond participate collectively in the monitoring system on different levels. This is our common objective, and depending on our active and effective engagement in the process, we can determine the success and results of our project. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, please, dear colleagues, feel free. I'm ready to answer. Thanks a lot, Dosbol. When I said that the work is going to be complicated, I didn't really say that things are going to be bad. It's just we have to take into account a lot of different things. And thank you very much for providing explanations. We have only 15 minutes left, so if there are any questions, how about we pose our questions later? I would like to give the floor to Gauhar. Gauhar will tell us about the gender principles of the program strategy of the UNDP, and she'll tell us about how we include the gender aspect into our projects and how we plan to engage gender aspects in this project. Could you please show my presentation? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is really great to take part in the launch of this significant project. As the person who spent her childhood in the meteorological station of the airport, the topic of climate change was very important to me since my childhood. And now let's be serious. As the counselor on gender aspects, my objective, just like in case with Dosbol, is to look at the integration of gender aspects. And in my presentation, given 10 minutes left, I will try to focus on the major principles. And probably I will begin with the climate change. When we talk about the climate change and gender equality, a lot of people may be puzzled thinking about how these things are connected. These things are actually intertwined because the climate change implications and the climate change in general can affect the life of the population differently. Kazakhstani population consists of boys and girls, men and women, elderly people, and when we speak of adaptation to climate change and when we speak of climate risks, we need to, and when we say we, I mean both UNDP and government bodies and other organizations, we need to hold the gender analysis and see how fires, floods, or shortage of water affect the life of the population. We will share this presentation with you, but in a nutshell. Major focus that we mean in this project is the involvement of women, not only from the standpoint of our experts in the project, but from the standpoint of the population at large, society at large, because we really want women to share their thoughts, their observations, and give their assessment on how these products will work. I mean, the result of the project, when I say products. In Kazakhstan, as you can see, there is diverse data, but if we look at the rural population and if we look at the involvement of women in management of lands or in forestry, it is a very small number. It should be mentioned here that not only this is the objective set by this project, and this is not just my idea or this is not just Saulet's idea. All of the questions related to the gender policy have been embodied in different international conventions, starting with the Paris Agreement, and the major convention is the UNFCCC. There are different plans in the country context. So it should be noted that a couple of years ago, when we published the analysis results as part of our eighth report, or eighth national communication, if we look at 10 major documents in the field of environment and climate change, only 3 of them are mentioned indirectly, mention the issues of gender indirectly, and I'm talking about the impact of climate on men and women. So if we look at the environmental code and if we look at other higher level documents, the environmental policy doesn't have a gender. And in fact, when we speak of the working plans and when we talk about the work with the population, we realize that such issues remain important. But as part of its work, the UNDP launched the project in the pilot mode. This is the project on increasing sensitivity of the government bodies to gender issues. We need to teach or train government bodies to how to harness gender expertise. And we work with the Ministry of Ecology. We wanted to launch a similar project, but probably the logical continuation of our work would include a closer cooperation with Ministry of Ecology once we've adapted our pilot project with the Ministry of Culture and Information. It'd be good to apply the same approach with regards to the Ministry of Ecology. Gender-based approach. I already mentioned it. It actually means that we divide the population into men and women, and we first of all look at what are their needs. I believe very often during natural disasters or calamities have to understand the needs of men and women with disabilities, and we have to think of the needs of children. And we need to realize the that inclusion of the communities is important, especially when it comes to local self-governance. And given different social aspects, in Central Asia, women are always left behind in terms of decision-making. So we held the analysis, and if you look at the budget of the local executive bodies, recently we held the comprehensive assessment, as a result of which we could see that unfortunately the gender equality project are not really covered in the higher level documents. I mean, there are no specific activities that are supposed to be carried out. And when I mentioned climate change, I think that gender events or activities are missing. So if you didn't know, this year Kazakhstan is going through the mandatory reporting. It's preparing the mandatory reporting to the committee, for Women's Affairs in New York, and it's supposed to provide the report for the last 4 years, saying about what has been done. We didn't have a lot of data about climate, and we didn't know about what needs to be done in order to make the policy in the field of climate change more sensitive. So I think that we have to look at what could be done in order to start bringing changes. In order to hold the gender analysis, in order to implement high-quality gender policy, each ministry and NGOs or research centers need to have the gender expertise. There should be scientific approaches or methodologies that help assess the impact of different national projects or programs on state budget and gender equality. For instance, not so long ago, in the beginning of June, as part of other UNDP project on risk reduction or risk mitigation of investments in the renewable energy sources, we held a workshop for lead experts lead field experts, for members of parliament, and for the government bodies. And we found out that not always since the topic was about the gender expertise in the context of fair energy transition, we found out that even in the strategy for low carbon development or zero emissions, there are no gender-based aspects. So it'd be good if we could cooperate on this matter, because we plan certain activities under this project. Gender expertise is what we are ready to offer in order to train people. We are ready to provide materials, because when we speak about the state policy, this is a very complicated phenomenon. It is a multifaceted phenomenon, and it was repeatedly mentioned that even the canister that Kaz Hydromet mentioned, collection of data is a big challenge to many countries, not only to Kazakhstan. So we see that Kazakhstan is ahead of other countries in terms of digital development, and therefore the collection of multidimensional data requires the involvement of different stakeholders, ministries, and it is quite possible. For example, under our program on fight against domestic violence, a lot of work has been done on the digital family card, when the Ministry of Labor, together with Ministry of Health and other ministries, managed to create this aggregate platform to analyze data. And I think that this is possible for the Ministry of Agriculture and for the Ministry of Ecology to follow similar steps and collect data. And I'd like to reiterate that the data needs to be disaggregated and split down by gender or by age groups. This is what I forgot to mention in the very beginning. Government and ourselves have to create equal opportunities and rights for everyone. And this is something prescribed by our constitution as well as by other laws and regulations. Therefore, understanding just let's look at this chart. I think that these are the common challenges for different governments of the world. And on the left, you see those spheres where the gender issues are not really raised. If you look at the participation of women, or if you look at the number of women who are on the positions of ministers, the number is very low. Gender stereotypes have a strong impact on how we develop policies, and policies are developed by people. So different stereotypes and gender stereotypes have a significant influence on us, on how we develop documents. For instance, if we go away from this topic, let me share a very simple example with you about how the gender stereotypes affected us during the emergency situations. The U.S. scientists carried out this analysis after a few hurricanes. This article is available on the internet in the English language, and as it turns out, a lot of damage was inflicted after hurricanes called by female names. And you've heard probably about the Katrina hurricane. And people start thinking about why this happens. As it turns out, when they surveyed the focus groups with the population, it turned out that the population believes that if a hurricane has a female name, then it's not that scary. Probably it is less dangerous and it is less destructive. Whereas when the hurricane has the male name, people would prepare more for such a hurricane. So these gender stereotypes affect the perception of the population. And I think that this is a very good remark for the Ministry of Emergency. Please make note of this remark. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing and we need to use male names to call different things. But I think that the gender stereotypes actually have impact on such emergencies, and they make a difference in terms of how people behave or make decisions. So, going back to the gender analysis and expertise, it is really important to understand the root cause. There are consequences, there are root causes, there are lots of trainings which we offer to their leadership in order to integrate the gender aspects. We've held such trainings for different ministries on numerous occasions. And again, this is one of the societal phenomena. In Kazakhstan, in terms of the culture of gender equality, we keep working a lot because, as I said earlier and as I showed earlier, there are certain gender stereotypes and there is disinformation about gender equality. Therefore, these workshops, discussions, and trainings are supposed to be held within each and every organization, in our opinion. So my main message here is that when we know more and when we know about gender equality approaches, methods, when we have expertise, when we know how to carry out such an analysis, that's when we can develop interconnected policies. And no one is saying that Kazakhstan lacks gender policy or that it is underdeveloped. In fact, there are lots of events, there are lots of plans, there are lots of concepts, but this interconnection in non-societal ministries, let me say, I'm talking about the Ministry of Ecology, construction, or industry, we see how such gender stereotypes affect the daily life. So, to wrap up, we usually take a classical approach, the UNDP routes for the inclusion of interests and needs. And Solet mentioned gap analysis, which means that we will hold the surveys and look at regions in the gender disaggregated way. We will look at the needs of men and women by different age groups, and I suggest that as part of this project we get back to our idea with the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources and think about how we can hold trainings for the ministry itself as well as for its accountable organizations. And of course, we will engage different stakeholders and make sure that the project listens to the voices of men and women as well as to the voices of other socially vulnerable groups of the population. And Dosbol already mentioned the monitoring and assessment. That implies the collection of gender-sensitive information. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, this is my contact information. I wish you every success, and I congratulate the project team on the launch. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions to Dosbol or to Gohar? I have a comment. Please go ahead. This issue that we're tackling here today doesn't have any gender-related issues. Just look at the breakdown between men and women in this room. There are fewer men than women here, so everything is fine, I think.
So the point is not the number, but rather quality. Any more questions, please? Then, Agul, over to you. Dear colleagues, you are kindly invited to proceed for lunch. It's room to your left. So, dear colleagues online, we come back at